r/Nosleep. Posted by Carl_Sefni. The Ghost of the Savanna. Part 1. Have you ever heard of the Tsavo lions? It's possible that you have. They're known as the man-eaters, famous for attacking workers during the construction of the railway in Kenya in the late 19th century. I folded the newspaper as the train whistle blew, indicating my train was pulling into the station. You might recall another account of mine, something involving a polar bear. Well, after that ordeal and the rescue, along with some well-deserved vacation, I had to return to my profession as a wildlife researcher. As you might imagine from my introduction, this time my destination was the vastness of the African savanna, in the heart of Kenya. I was given a delicate task, not exactly a research endeavor. I was to assist in resolving a serious problem, investigating the sudden disappearance of children from villages near a nature reserve. What made the case even more intriguing was the fact that animal tracks were found where the children had vanished. With my backpack filled with research equipment and a mix of anxiety and determination in my chest, I stepped off my carriage, my eyes scanning for my contact in the country. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the golden expanse of the landscape, and the air shimmered with heat. The old wooden station creaked with the footsteps of other researchers, villagers heading into town, and a few missionary groups. A man approached me, his face weathered by the sun and age, but his eyes still gleaming with an intensity that spoke of experience and wisdom. Around his waist, some kind of hide was wrapped. He looked me up and down and said, "You must be the doctor, right?" he said, extending his hand. "I'm Barasa, chief of the tribe that contacted you." He tapped his chest. "Yes, though I'm not exactly a doctor," I replied, shaking the man's hand. "Anyway, it's a pleasure to meet you, Barasa. I believe we should hasten to advance the investigation." Barasa nodded, his serious gaze reflecting the gravity and urgency. He then led me to an old red pickup truck, marked by a thick layer of dry, dusty grime, where we set off together toward the nature reserve. The path was steep and rocky. The poor condition of the vehicle made me jump at every small obstacle in the road, even with the seatbelt fastened. During the journey, Barasa explained more details about the disappearances. In recent months, several children have mysteriously disappeared from our village. And from others too, he began, his tone heavy with concern. We, the tribe, initially suspected wild animals, but something's not right. The tracks we found are confusing, not like any animal we know. As the old man spoke, my gaze wandered over the arid and wild landscape stretching around us. There was something unsettling in the atmosphere, something that made me feel as though we were being watched. The yellowed and sparse vegetation covered certain points, and in the distance, I could see a pond where zebras drank water peacefully, their stripes standing out against the backdrop of the savanna. However, the calm scene couldn't completely dispel the sense of tension, especially when a crocodile leapt from the waters and snapped up a zebra next to its foal. It fatally dragged it under, leaving the little one alone, abandoned by the herd that fled with the commotion. When you work with wild animals for so long, you develop a certain tolerance. But I confess it still bothers me. Sometimes you forget how cruel nature can be. I shook my head to dispel those dark thoughts and refocused on the conversation with Barasa. "That is indeed disturbing," I murmured, trying to keep calm. "Do you have any theories about what could be causing these disappearances?" He remained silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead as he pondered my words. Finally, he spoke in a grave tone. "Some of our legends speak of a creature known as the Ghost of the Savanna," he explained, his voice tinged with a mixture of fear and respect. "Some believe it has become a threat to the local inhabitants, a shadow that lurks and feeds on the flesh of those who venture too far from their villages." He turned to me and locked eyes with me. "But you, white men, don't seem to believe in that, nor do you respect the spirits." Shivers ran down my spine as I listened to Barasa's ominous words. Well, I'd say I'm much more inclined to believe in something, at least compared to how I was, and... Wait, did you say you guys? Yes, that investigator, forest ranger. What was his name again? Benjamin. Benjamin? Ah, you're referring to Forest Ranger Benjamin Wright, I replied, trying to recall the reports I had read about his work in the region. Yes, he was tasked with investigating some strange occurrences around here a few years ago. I didn't know he was still around. As far as I know, he didn't find anything concrete to explain the disappearances. Barasa nodded grimly, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly until his knuckles turned white. "He found nothing because he wasn't willing to believe in what he couldn't explain," Barasa said bitterly. "But I know the ghost was there. And I know if you're honest, you'll see it too." I swallowed hard, feeling a chill run down my spine. The determination in the elder's eyes left no room for doubt. He was convinced that something terrible was happening on the savannah and defied any rational explanation. As we progressed along the dusty road, the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of red and orange. The air grew cooler, and a sense of unease spread through the atmosphere. Then, suddenly, we heard a thunderous roar echoing across the landscape, causing my heart to skip a beat. "What was that?" I exclaimed, my pulse racing with fear. "That's the ghost." His head tilted slowly, his widened eyes meeting mine before he burst into laughter. "Come on, doctor, don't they teach you about lions in college? It's just a family of them living around here." His laughter wasn't enough to ease my nerves. I could swear the roar wasn't ordinary, it was unlike any lion sound I'd heard before. I shook my head, trying to trust the old man's experience. "Ah, of course, lions. It's just, well, part of my job to be cautious, you know?" I tried to explain, forcing a smile that probably looked as fake as I felt. He only nodded, his serious expression returning as we continued toward the nature reserve. The sun sank further into the horizon, leaving behind a landscape shrouded in shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were entering unknown territory. As we traveled along the dusty dirt road, the shadows lengthened, turning solitary trees into menacingly human-like silhouettes and creating fleeting illusions that danced on the edge of our peripheral vision. I forced myself to focus on the road ahead, ignoring the shivers running down my spine, until our car trembled. Baras's words died in my ears as the vehicle shook violently. The sound of twisted metal echoed in the air as the rear tire burst, causing the truck to slide off the road and come to an abrupt stop, narrowly missing a huge rock. My body was thrown forward with the impact, my seatbelt the only thing preventing me from colliding with the dashboard. Gasping, I recovered from the shock and looked around, trying to assess the situation. Barasa was as stunned as I was beside me, but he seemed unharmed. However, the same couldn't be said for the vehicle. Its rear crumpled and the front scraped against the rock. The sun had completely set, plunging us into the darkness of the wild night. "Are we okay, Barasa?" I asked, trying to stay calm as I struggled to open the window. The warm night air enveloped my body, and I was greeted by the pungent smell of dry vegetation and moist earth. "I think so, but what?" He fell silent. "What is it, Bara?" He covered my mouth. I began to hear, subtly, heavy breathing from the back of the car, behind us. It sounded like something heavy was slowly approaching. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked to Barasa, his widened eyes reflecting the same fear I felt. The sound of the breathing grew louder, almost deafening in the stillness of the night. With slow, cautious movements, I turned to look out the rear window. What I saw sent chills down my spine. It was absolute darkness. Nothingness. Emptiness. And if that hadn't disturbed me enough, what followed tripled the problem, two bright points, together, moving back and forth. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the glowing eyes in the darkness, moving as if they were watching us closely, waiting for the right moment to act. The sensation of being hunted flooded my body, paralyzing me with fear. What is that?" I whispered to Barasa, my words barely audible over the frantic pounding of my heart. "Did that thing attack the car?" He shook his head slowly, his eyes fixed on the glowing points beyond the window. "I don't know, but we're in great danger, Doctor." The sounds grew deeper, and the unseen creature moved backward, beyond our field of vision. We waited for what felt like eternity, trying to hear its footsteps and its breathing. I decided to risk peeking again, and I saw nothing but the comforting void. "Now. All right, Doctor, let's try to call." Barasa's voice trembled as we were shaken once more. I felt the pressure on the back of the car again, this time stronger. "That thing is standing up. On the back of the car." My mouth opened in horror, in a soundless scream, as my brain processed Barasa's words. Without hesitation, I grabbed my backpack and reached for the satellite phone they had given me. My hands shook as I frantically tuned into the channel to talk to the village, desperately hoping for a response from the other end of the line. Meanwhile, the sounds of movement in the back of the car continued, growing increasingly intense and eerie. The metal groaned and creaked under the weight of the unknown creature, while my mind raced trying to imagine what could be pursuing us. It was when the rear window began to crack that we heard a loud snap echoing through the night, causing birds and small animals to scatter. The sound was followed by two bright headlights, followed by others, two cars, and on top of the first one, coming out through the sunroof, was the upper half of Benjamin Wright, holding his rifle. He fired again in the direction of that thing, and we felt the weight lift off the car, as heavy steps faded into the darkness. I trembled uncontrollably, my body tense and my mind in turmoil as I tried to process what had just happened. Wright was there, like an unexpected savior emerging from the shadows, and yet, his presence only deepened the mystery. Barasa and I exchanged glances, relief mixed with confusion etched on our faces. How did he know we were in danger? So many questions swirled in my mind, but before I could articulate any of them, Benjamin's raspy Australian-accented voice cut through the silence of the night. "Are you both okay in there?" His voice sounded distorted, laden with tension and concern. "We need to get out of here immediately." "Yes, we're okay," I replied, my voice trembling with tension. What was that? What's happening here?" "I really have no idea, but it's better not to stick around." "Quick, no time for detailed explanations," Benjamin replied swiftly, his voice sounding more urgent than ever. "We need to get to the village as fast as possible." With my heart still pounding erratically, I turned to Barasa, whose face was pale and tense, reflecting the same anguish I felt. Without exchanging a word, we both silently agreed to follow Benjamin's instructions and leave that cursed place behind as quickly as possible. As the truck's engine roared back to life and we began to move away from the scene of our horrific encounter, I felt enveloped by a simultaneous sense of relief and desperation. We were alive, yes, but the threat looming over us was all too real to ignore. As the vehicle sped along the dusty road and the darkness of the African night enveloped us like a cloak, I knew this experience was far from over. The narrow road wound its way into the savannah. Every sound, every shadow, made my heart beat faster, and I struggled to control my rapid breathing. The journey to the village seemed endless, every turn of the road an opportunity for fear to take root deeper in my mind. I could feel unseen eyes watching us, feel the weight of the sinister presence still following us, even when we couldn't see it. I was definitely paranoid. Was this how the first conscious man felt? Did our ancestors have to deal with this constant fear? My mind wandered through local stories and legends, each one darker than the last. The ghost of the savannah, that mysterious creature Barasa had mentioned, seemed now more real than ever. What if it was true? What if we weren't just dealing with wild animals? These thoughts haunted my mind as we reached the village, where we were greeted with a mixture of relief and anxiety. People crowded around us, their tired and worried faces reflecting the general concern that hung over the community. I could feel the palpable fear in the air, as tangible as the smell of smoke from the fires that illuminated the darkness of the night. Benjamin led the way, his hardened face seemingly devoid of fear, a curved scar from his chin to his ear. He seemed willing to go back into the dark night to catch the thing himself, but he wouldn't do it out of refusal from others. And as he quickly conversed with the village elders, I wondered what he might know, or hide, from us. The night passed in a blur of frantic activity as the villagers prepared to defend themselves against the unknown threat lurking in the shadows. Traps were set, torches were lit, and children were kept safe inside mud huts, away from the imminent danger lurking outside. The night stretched on, endless, as we waited for the dawn that would bring with it the promise of safety. It was in this panic that, inside Barasa's house, leaning against a straw mat and watching the smoldering remnants of the fire escape through the roof, I fell asleep. After a myriad of dreams, I finally woke with a start. The dim light of dawn seeped through the cracks in the mud walls of the hut, revealing Barasa's huddled figure, sleeping beside me in a restless state. I rose slowly, feeling exhausted and disoriented, as I tried to shake off the remnants of the nightmare still echoing in my mind. The smell of smoke still hung in the air, mingling with the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of villagers preparing outside. With a tired sigh, I stepped off the straw mat and approached the door of the hut, pushing it open carefully to create a gap through which I could peer out into the world beyond. The sun was beginning to rise on the distant horizon, tinting the sky with golden and rosy hues, as the savannah came to life around it. A dim morning light revealed a serene and tranquil landscape, completely different from the sinister atmosphere of the previous night. However, even under the rising sun, I couldn't completely shake off the feeling that something terrible was still lurking in the shadows of the savannah. As I watched the village come alive with morning activity, my thoughts turned to the events of the previous night. The encounter with that unknown creature, the glowing eyes in the darkness, the panic that had spread through the community. It all seemed surreal, like it was part of a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. Lost in my thoughts, a gentle hand landed on my shoulder, making me jump in surprise. I turned quickly to find Barasa's concerned eyes staring at me. "Are you okay, doctor?" he asked, his voice laden with genuine concern. I nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Yes, I'm fine. Just reflecting on everything that happened." He nodded understandingly, his gaze reflecting his own confusion and apprehension. "I know how you feel. Last night was difficult for all of us." He paused for a long moment. "Benjamin wants to speak with you, he has some information," something like that. He didn't exactly say what it was. "I see. Thank you for letting me know, Barasa," I replied, struggling to keep my voice calm and controlled, the memories of last night coming back even stronger now. "I'll go to him immediately." With a nod of his head, Barasa stepped away, leaving me alone with my tumultuous thoughts. I wondered what Benjamin had to say, as so far his progress had been nil. I made my way through the village to the hut where Benjamin was staying. As I approached, I could see the tall, imposing figure of the ranger standing outside, surveying the surrounding landscape with a serious and focused expression, as if keeping watch, looking back and forth. "Benjamin," I called out as I got close enough to be heard. He turned to face me, his stern face relaxing into a brief smile. "Ah, Doctor, good morning. How are you feeling after last night?" "A bit shaken, but I'm okay," I replied honestly. "By the way, in the rush I couldn't properly greet you. How's old Benjamin right?" He chuckled briefly, but there was an underlying tension in his expression that didn't escape my notice. "Ah, old Benjamin is doing fine, considering the circumstances. But let's get straight to the point, I have some information that I think you'll want to hear." I nodded and approached him. "Well," he began, "we have an interesting pattern that was found at the place where the children disappeared, strange footprints," he explained, his deep voice tinged with a tone of mystery. "They are larger than those of the animals that live in this region and they seem different, somehow." "Different how?" "It's like the paw of a big predator, a feline, but larger, a bit irregular at the edges. And yes, it was the thing that attacked you all yesterday." "The ghost of the Savanna?" The words spilled out of me like a fountain, automatically. Benjamin let out a long laugh. "Doctor, are you sure you haven't caught a sunstroke? Don't let Barasa poison your mind with these things, I'm sure we're dealing with something perfectly natural." I felt a little embarrassed by Benjamin's laughter. But if those strange footprints really indicated the presence of an unknown creature, then why was he so determined to dismiss the idea of the ghost of the Savanna? "I understand it may seem absurd, but what exactly do you think we're dealing with here?" I asked, my voice laden with skepticism. He leaned forward, his serious gaze with a slight hint of excitement. "I think we're dealing with a big feline, maybe a lion or a panther, that's causing trouble in the region," he explained. "It may be an unusual specimen, larger than usual, but there's nothing supernatural about it, just an animal trying to survive in an increasingly threatening environment." He turned, looking at the horizon, and just thinking about a creature of that size roaming around, a super predator, already excites me to think that I can put it on my wall, framed. I nodded, trying to process Benjamin's explanation. It was hard to ignore the evidence of his theory, but at the same time, something didn't quite fit. A small voice in the back of my mind insisted that something was off. "I understand," I murmured, my mind still undecided. "But what about the children's disappearances? Does this theory explain that as well?" Benjamin seemed to consider my question for a moment before responding. "It's hard to say for sure, but it's possible that the animal in question has been forced to hunt different prey than usual due to the pressure exerted on its territory," he suggested. "Perhaps the children became easy targets amidst the chaos." His explanation made sense to a certain extent. "Anyway, let's continue investigating," he said, grabbing some items from the back of his jeep. "Here, let's spread these traps around the area," he said while holding his bulging bag. "Take these cameras and come with me," he pointed to 2 cases still in the car. I nodded, agreeing with his words. Although I was willing to consider the possibility that what we were facing was just a big predator, a part of me still remained skeptical, and trying to capture at least one image of it could either reassure me or perhaps terrify me even more. We moved in silence, the sounds of nature around us seeming amplified, noisy birds, distant monkeys. Sometimes we encountered herds of herbivores walking peacefully. We placed the traps in strategic locations, with some fresh meat baits, hoping to lure the beast into a hole dug in the ground. The cameras were carefully set up, aimed at areas where the children had disappeared, some hidden in trees, activating their motion sensors. As we worked, a sense of unease continued to grow within me, as if we were being watched by something. The same bitter taste of last night came to my mouth. I struggled to ignore this feeling, focusing my attention on the work we had before us. "I hope this gives us some clue about what we're dealing with all due respect, but doing this work in this heat sucks," I muttered to Benjamin as I adjusted one of the cameras. He agreed, his expression still serious as he looked around. as if searching for something. He was feeling it too. "Let's head back to the village, we have enough," he finally said, his voice laden. "Let's inform the elders and see if there's anything else to be done. Otherwise, all we can do is wait." I agreed, feeling relieved at the thought of returning to the relative safety of the village. Nature, as always, majestic and a place of countless dangers, especially when facing an unknown threat. The journey back to the village was silent, our thoughts immersed in speculation about what might be happening in that remote place. The sun had already passed its peak when we finally arrived at the community, where we were greeted by a crowd of anxious villagers waiting for news from us. The elders gathered around us, their faces serious and worried, reflecting the gravity of the situation we found ourselves in. I struggled to find a way to explain what we had discovered, but every explanation seemed to fall short of what was truly needed. "We found some evidence suggesting that we're dealing with a big predator in the area," I explained, trying to choose my words carefully. "We've set up traps and cameras in the hope of capturing any sign of the creature, but we're still not sure what we're dealing with." The elders listened attentively, their faces trembling as they processed the information we provided. It was evident that they were concerned, but they also didn't want to stand idly by in the face of the threat. "What should we do?" one of the elders asked, his voice laden with anxiety. "How can we protect our children?" Benjamin and I exchanged glances. There were no easy answers, no clear plan of action to deal with the unknown. "We'll continue monitoring the area," Benjamin began, his authoritative voice faltering slightly. "We'll keep an eye on the cameras and traps until we have a better idea of what we're dealing with." The elders nodded and exchanged glances, saying a few words in their own dialect. It wasn't clear if they truly trusted Benjamin. "In the meantime, keep your children close to home and avoid traveling alone through the savannah," he continued. "We'll do everything in our power to protect our community and find a solution to this problem, I promise you." As the sun set on the distant horizon, casting a golden light over the vast and wild landscape around us, I knew that the work was only just beginning. The atmosphere in the village was tense, charged. There were no festivities or singing around the bonfire, as Barasa told me there were. As the night progressed, the only thing the villagers did was retire to their homes, staying alert for any sign of imminent danger. I found myself quickly wandering the deserted exterior, soon captured by fear. As I passed by the thatched houses illuminated by the dim glow of torches, I could feel the anxious looks of the residents, all of them sharing the same silent concern. I decided to retreat back into the chief's house, where the warmth of the crackling fire offered some comfort against the serene cold. I sat in silence, lost in my own thoughts, while Barasa tended to the flames and blew on the embers. "Barasa, what do you think we're up against?" I asked, finally breaking the tense silence. He turned to me, his face marked by concern. "Doctor, I don't know what to think," he admitted, giving a slight smile. "Our last encounter last night left me with many doubts. The people of the village only talk about the ghost of the savannah." A shiver ran down my spine at his words. "But what about you, Barasa? What do you believe?" He sighed deeply. His silence served as an answer. "I just know that we need to protect ourselves," he continued, his voice firm, looking towards the corner of the hut where his young son, Bantu, slept soundly. "I won't let anything harm any other member of our tribe." A knock on the door made us both jump, interrupting our conversation. Barasa quickly got up and went to check who was outside, while I remained tense, my heart racing. What on earth was so urgent? Barasa opened the door and stepped back, his face assuming an expression of surprise mixed with haste. Outside stood Benjamin, finishing adjusting his boot, his rifle on his back. He didn't enter the hut. He stayed outside with a grave air. "We don't have time, follow me," he said, his deep voice echoing in the tense silence of the hut. Barasa and I exchanged glances. "What happened?" I asked, my voice laden with anxiety. He was already turning away, and without turning back, he just stopped and said, "It looks like he took the bait, let's go before it escapes." We followed Benjamin out of the hut, hurriedly. As we walked through the village, I felt a sense of apprehension. An owl sang deep and solemn, making a trail accompanied by distant jackal choruses as we walked. We followed in silence, with Benjamin leading the way through a narrow path in the bush, tall grass brushing and irritating my leg as I chastised myself for forgetting to wear my high boots. As we approached the traps and cameras we had installed in the savannah, I could feel my anxiety rising. Finally, we arrived at the spot where we had placed one of the traps. Benjamin stopped abruptly, silently indicating for us to hide behind some nearby trees. "Look," he whispered, pointing to one of the cameras that was facing the indistinguishable darkness of the night. I decided to retreat back into the chief's house, where the warmth of the crackling fire offered some comfort against the serene cold. I sat in silence, lost in my own thoughts, while Barasa tended to the flames and blew on the embers. "Barasa, what do you think we're up against?" I asked, finally breaking the tense silence. He turned to me, his face marked by concern. "Doctor, I don't know what to think," he admitted, giving a slight smile. "Our last encounter last night left me with many doubts. The people of the village only talk about the ghost of the Savanna." A shiver ran down my spine at his words. "But what about you, Barasa? What do you believe?" He sighed deeply. His silence served as an answer. "I just know that we need to protect ourselves," he continued, his voice firm, looking towards the corner of the hut where his young son, Bantu, slept soundly. "I won't let anything harm any other member of our tribe." A knock on the door made us both jump, interrupting our conversation. Barasa quickly got up and went to check who was outside, while I remained tense, my heart racing. What on earth was so urgent? Barasa opened the door and stepped back, his face assuming an expression of surprise mixed with haste. Outside stood Benjamin, finishing adjusting his boot, his rifle on his back. He didn't enter the hut. He stayed outside with a grave air. "We don't have time, follow me," he said, his deep voice echoing in the tense silence of the hut. Barasa and I exchanged glances. "What happened?" I asked, my voice laden with anxiety. He was already turning away, and without turning back, he just stopped and said, "It looks like he took the bait, let's go before it escapes." We followed Benjamin out of the hut, hurriedly. As we walked through the village, I felt a sense of apprehension. An owl sang deep and solemn, making a trail accompanied by distant jackal choruses as we walked. We followed in silence, with Benjamin leading the way through a narrow path in the bush, tall grass brushing and irritating my leg as I chastised myself for forgetting to wear my high boots. As we approached the traps and cameras we had installed in the savannah, I could feel my anxiety rising. Finally, we arrived at the spot where we had placed one of the traps. Benjamin stopped abruptly, silently indicating for us to hide behind some nearby trees. "Look," he whispered, pointing to one of the cameras that was facing the indistinguishable darkness of the night. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the image on the screen. It was undeniably the largest lion I had ever seen, at least personally. It was making those deep sounds, almost a purring, as it stood up, trying to reach the hanging meat. The trap hole was not hidden, but exposed, with a layer of leaves scattered all around. I felt that something was wrong, but not like the other night. It wasn't quite fear, just there was something very wrong. "He's not going to fall now that he can see the hole," Benjamin cursed as he pulled the gun from his back. He pointed it at the creature. "Now let's finish this." "No, wait," I shouted, finally understanding what was wrong, throwing myself onto him to prevent the shot from being fired. The animal ran as soon as I shouted, fleeing to wherever it was going. "What the hell was that, doctor? Do I have to ask again if the sun fried your brains?" Benjamin said, visibly red even in the darkness. I took a deep breath, trying to control my breathing. "Look, I'm sorry, but that's not the beast we are looking for." "How is it not?" he bellowed. "Think about it, it just ran off when I yelled. Our monster is cautious, but not afraid of humans." Barasa seemed to agree. "And furthermore, why was the animal so easily visible? Why was the trap uncovered? It seems like someone may have manipulated the situation." Benjamin frowned, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Are you suggesting someone's behind this? Why would someone do that?" I shook my head, unable to provide a clear answer. "I don't know, but something's not right. We need to be careful and not act hastily." A beep sounded from Benjamin's device. He stopped, looked, and as soon as his eyes met the image on the screen, he froze. I never thought I'd see him like that. For a few seconds, I could swear he didn't breathe. "What's wrong, man? Speak up." Barasa pressed him. He turned to us, showing this image, a huge lion, on the camera that was at the camp store. Its fur was completely white. I don't know if the picture can convey its size, but believe me, we don't have a lion of this size registered. We were petrified until we heard, closer and louder than we expected, a hoarse and animalistic roar, the roar that caused my nightmares, and beyond it, all we heard were Barasa's few words. "The ghost of the Savanna. The ghost of the Savanna." Final. My spine tingled. Benjamin started to run, leading the way, followed by Barasa, and lastly, me. We could hear the animal and the commotion starting to form in the village. When we were a few meters away, all of this culminated in a dry, deathly scream. A woman screamed in despair. We arrived to find her, facing the darkness of the forest, her arms outstretched, calling for her son, swallowed by the monster. The scene before us was terrible. The other villagers gathered around, trying to console her. Barasa ran to her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder as he murmured something. Benjamin was looking into the darkness of the forest, his face serious. "We must do something," he said, his voice urgent. I agreed. "And what do you suggest?" He ran to his jeep, and I understood that I should follow him. We got in and took the road. As he accelerated sinuously along the dusty route, almost running over unaware small animals daring to cross the path, I monitored through the camera images where the ghost of the savannah was. We reached a rock wall. He was running there and probably couldn't escape, or at least, escape with the child. We descended carefully, while Ben was already cocking his gun. We walked crouched through the taller vegetation, approaching the surreal structure of the wall, its silhouette depriving us of the moonlight, and making us enter a dark and ominous territory. "It's been 10 minutes since he passed through here," I said, checking the clock. "Are you sure he didn't leave?" No, Benjamin said, darker. "I know he stays in this place. It's his slaughterhouse." Those words got me, my blood chilling from my stomach to my back. I looked to the side for the first time and saw, staring back at me, a skull, half buried, its empty sockets penetrating my soul. My muscles tensed with anxiety as we continued, trying to ignore this disturbing fact. Slowly, however, I began to hear a sound. It was something wet? Like when you step with a boot in the mud, and it creates that vacuum layer. I realized what it was when I looked ahead. In the distance, I could make out the white spot, lying on the grass. It was evident why the natives judged him a ghost. But there was something under it. I approached and strained my eyes. And I shouldn't have. The noise came from him. He was chewing something, gnawing, and when his mouth released, I could see the head of the young man who had been taken, partially eaten. My stomach churned as I watched the scene, disgusted but with a fixed gaze. Like I said, you see a lot of death scenes in nature, it's the cycle, but I never got used to seeing this with humans. I guess it makes you feel, I don't know, too fragile? It's impressive how even after so many millennia of advancement in building a safe place, man is still a fragile creature. Just a thinking read. "Damn. This isn't good," I murmured. "And now Benjamin, what do we?" Something hard hit my head and I blacked out. When I woke up, I was lying on the hard ground, face down, with a throbbing headache. It took a moment to fully regain consciousness and realize where I was. There was a weight on top of me, and soon the idea of the lion came to mind. I began to panic and struggle, but then I heard a voice in my ear. "Easy, Sleeping Beauty," came the rough voice of whoever was on top of me. He was now tying my arms. "We're just making sure you don't spend too much of your energy." I struggled to turn my neck and look at him. I had no idea who he was, wearing a hat with mosquito netting, camouflaged clothing, and a rifle on his back. Hunters, I supposed. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, my voice weak and trembling. The man smiled, a smile full of malice that sent a shiver down my spine. "You don't need to know right now, Doctor," he said, his voice smooth contrasting with the cold expression in his eyes. "But you should feel honored to serve as dinner for our little albino friend." My heart sank in my chest as I struggled against despair. "Please, you can't do this," I pleaded, trying to find some humanity in him. "I didn't even see what you guys did. I'll just leave and everything will be okay. No one will find out." He laughed, shaking his head. "Oh, I'm sure no one will find out. I can't take the risk of you warning others about my presence here," he explained, his eyes gleaming with a sinister fire. "Besides, I think I can make some good money selling a doctor like you on the black market." I trembled. "Ha, that was good, Max," a fuller voice said somewhere I couldn't see. "Are you going to leave him in the tree?" "Yeah, now come here and help me hang him. That thing can come back at any moment." I felt arms grabbing me and lifting me up. They left me in one of the trees, for the first time looking at them. I got a better look at the face of this Max guy. A thin mustache marked his upper lip while the other, a fatter and sunburned man, sported a crooked smile. As they laughed and talked about what they would do with me, a movement in the background caught my attention. I saw, walking straight, Benjamin. He had a serious and authoritative air that I had never seen in him, approaching while wielding his rifle in one hand. I tried not to show that I had seen him, so that he could arrive unexpectedly. He approached, however, when he was about 10 meters away, I felt something strange in the air. He didn't raise the gun, just kept walking until he stopped behind them. "Ben?" I finally said. The man turned around. "It looks like you really blacked out," he said. "Max, Cliff, is everything ready?" "Sure thing, boss," Cliff replied. "The truck's already loaded," he said, pointing. I followed his gaze to see an old 4x4 filled with things behind it, some ivory and what I assumed to be skin. "Great. Look, Doctor," Benjamin turned to me. "I'm really sorry about this, okay? But I can't take any risks. I'll tell Barasa that you died heroically, okay?" "I don't. What's going on?" "For a doctor, you're pretty dumb," Max said. "I hate this James Bond villain cliché that explains your whole plan and everything. So, to make sure you can't say I wasn't nice, tell me, Doctor, what do you think is happening here? Come on, it's not hard. I already figured out the hunter's scheme, and that you sold out to them. But is all this to catch the white lion?" Cliff burst into laughter. Max turned serious and gave him a slap on the neck. No, Ben said. "The lion is just a small pawn of ours, or rather, a big pawn. Did you know you can teach an animal like that to like the taste of human flesh?" His eyes met mine, relishing when he saw the mental realization in me, when I understood what he had done. It wasn't organic. He chose the animal. Gave it some people, maybe villagers or other researchers. He shaped its appetite until, on its own, the ghost came after the others. "Why?" I asked, the only thing that came out of my mouth. "It's business. Can't feed many mouths with research money, and I think you know that better than anyone. We needed the village far from here and, if they won't leave, we'll force them to flee, or they'll be devoured one by one." It was a cruel and inhumane plan, and I felt sick just thinking about it. "That's insane," I exclaimed, my voice trembling with indignation. "You're the real monster of the savannah, Benjamin." He shrugged, as if it was no big deal. "Business is business, Doctor. They should have accepted our offers to buy the land, but they're too stubborn for that. This is just an efficient way to solve the problem." I felt a mixture of anger and despair building up inside me. He laughed, as if he found my indignation amusing. "Good luck with that, Doctor. You'll need it." With that, he turned and began to walk away, followed by Max and Cliff. I watched them get into the truck and drive away. I found myself alone, tied to a tree, feeling powerless, as the first rays of sunlight appeared on the horizon, bringing to my eyes the savannah, the beautiful and cruel nature. I decided to at least try to free myself. I weakly kicked the trunk of the tree, trying to swing myself, moved my arms and shoulders in unimaginably painful ways, but nothing but my noises soon caught attention. I saw in the distance, at the end of my field of vision, a small spot, increasing as it approached, a white spot. The monstrous lion was coming, as usual, to receive the feeding from its cruel and sadistic handlers, and this time I was the dinner. The lion approached slowly, its bright eyes fixed on me, as I frantically struggled against the ropes binding me to the tree. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I knew I had no chance against that beast. I had to escape as soon as possible. The animal stopped a few meters from me, sniffing the air with curiosity. Its eyes showed hunger, and I could feel the weight of its presence suffocating me. It was like staring death in the face. I kept struggling, desperately trying to free myself, but the ropes were tightly tied. I was completely helpless. The lion let out a low growl, its muscles tensing, preparing to pounce, ending my existence. I closed my eyes, accepting my fate, when a thunderous roar made me flinch, echoing through the cliff. I opened my eyes in time to see a figure emerging from the nearby vegetation. It was another lion? Yes, big, that lion from before? It advanced towards the albino lion, emitting roars that echoed across the plain. The albino lion recoiled at the threat, clearly surprised by the presence of the new intruder. The common lion wasted no time and charged at the ghost, launching into a fierce confrontation. The two animals grappled, snarling and roaring, as layers of blood gradually emerged on their bodies. Taking advantage of the distraction, I redoubled my efforts to free myself from the ropes, and finally, with Herculean effort, I managed to break free. I ran as fast as I could, moving away from the site of the confrontation, while the roars and sounds of the fight echoed behind me. I didn't look back. I wasn't interested in seeing the outcome of the battle. I just wanted to get away from there as soon as possible. I ran, praying that they wouldn't give up the fight and decide to come after me. I walked confused and disoriented, off the trail, remembering that I should also hide from Benjamin and his henchmen. It was a day of exhaustion, fearing man and animal, the jungle and civilization, not knowing which would cause me more harm. But finally, as night began to show its face, I cautiously approached the tribe, attentive to any sign. I crouched down when I saw Wright's hat brim. He was talking to Barasa. "I'm sorry, but that's what happened. The doctor is gone, along with the boy." Now I understood the discomfort his voice caused me, finally understood the falsehood behind his words. "Let's avenge him. Gather men. Let's end this once and for all. Meet me at the edge of the village." "It won't be necessary," I shouted, emerging from the bushes. "I'm right here." Barasa and Benjamin turned abruptly to stare at me, surprised by my arrival. The elder was the first to react, with a mixture of relief and confusion written on his face. "Doctor. But how? What happened?" "Barasa, it's a long story," I began, taking a deep breath to calm myself. "But we don't have time for that now." I was panting. "Benjamin is behind the attacks." His gaze turned to the man. "Oh, I think you're just fatigued, doctor. Come on, have some water and—" "Shut up," I yelled at him. "He's working with hunters." I started walking toward him but stopped when he took the gun from his back and aimed it at Barasa's chest. "One more step. One more step, you bastard, and I'll blow the old man up." We were both tense as we stared at each other. Surely, if he shot one of us, the other would have time to attack him. But I didn't play with lives like he did. "Okay," I said, raising my arms. "Just go, you don't need all this." "That's what I'm gonna do, but only when this area is completely clear for us." He pulled a radio from his waist. "Max, you copy? I need reinforcements here, some extra weapons would come in handy." Silence. Ben adjusted the radio. "Cliff, get over here with Max, bring all the weapons." Silence. What the— He stopped talking. We all stopped, while, from the midst of the dense forest, walking slowly, we saw the figure emerge. He was wounded, deep marks on his face. His right eye was now gone, and the remaining one, bruised, gleamed fiercely. He was panting, and blood dripped from his mouth. He stopped and looked at us, then began to regurgitate, like cats with hairballs. He forced his diaphragm more and more until he expelled something that rolled until it found Benjamin's feet and stopped, Max's head, still with its mouth open, frozen in a scream expression. Benjamin seemed paralyzed by the scene, unable to react. The lion took another step. "Easy, kitty," he said, now turning the gun to the animal. The ghost of the savannah took another step, and another. Benjamin fired, in panic. If I hadn't been there, I would doubt it, but I clearly saw the bullet pass through the creature, as if it didn't exist. He fired another shot, which again pierced the lion as if it were just a beam of light. The beast leapt onto Benjamin, biting his leg. I could hear as its fangs sank into the soft flesh of his calf. "Please, help me." I saw the panic in his face, the pure fear. Tears formed in what had been the most stoic face I could think of. "Don't let it kill me." His screams began to intensify as he was dragged to the grass. His hand sought support somewhere on the ground, on rocks and roots, but all he managed was to leave his nails behind. Finally, when he was completely hidden by the vegetation, he reached an apex of agony, his screams attracting all the other villagers around, until, about 5 minutes later, he fell silent. Everything fell silent, in fact. Deadly quiet. The lion then got up, looking at us. Some villagers backed away, others pointed their spears. He, however, just stared at us, let out the loudest roar I've ever heard, making me cover my ears with my hands, turned, and walked into the dark night, disappearing again. We stood paralyzed, numb with what had happened without even understanding. The next few days flew by quickly. To summarize the story, there were no more child disappearances, no more mysterious deaths. The village grew and prospered. That same day, we called the local authorities, warning them about Benjamin. His body, however, was never found. The only corpse they found, curiously, was that of a large white lion on the stone wall of the region, practically a record size for the species. It was severely injured in the head, the result of a fight with another male. After that, I understood that what sought Max, Cliff, and of course, Benjamin that night, was genuinely the ghost of the savannah, in its most literal sense. There are many differences between man and nature, but the one I realized that night was definitely that nature doesn't know when it's already dead.